I'm so excited to talk to you today about a really important topic that I think could help many of you who are just starting out your writing career. Now, my original intention for this video was if I had to start from scratch as a screenwriter, what would I do? But soon I kind of found myself sort of wafting into this whole cycle of questions like, should I start at the very, very beginning if I knew absolutely nothing? And I kind of thought like, am I going to pick it up from when I was actually in film school and I knew a little bit about it? What am I going to include? Do I have no knowledge? Do I have some knowledge? I mean, usually when people do these types of videos, it's sort of like, okay, well, I do have some sort of knowledge, which is why I'm going to give you this knowledge about what I didn't know. It turns out I don't want to teach you how I would do it if I started from like baby me who had no idea what I was doing. I'd actually like to talk to you from a perspective of if you were a new writer who came to me for advice, what advice and guidance would I give you so that you can get started like right after this video? Welcome back to my channel, Scribes. Happy New Year! I am so excited to start out the year writing and talking more about writing and just sort of living and breathing my work. I am Pika Lee. I'm a writer and filmmaker. The purpose of this channel is to develop you as a screenwriter and writer overall, and of course, bring you a little bit more information and knowledge about the business of writing itself. Okay, now on to if I met you and you asked me for guidance about how to start screenwriting today, right now, with pretty much zero knowledge, this is the advice I would give to you. The first thing I would start with is some recommended resources. This gives you just sort of downtime reading and extra resources for you to watch that will aid in what I'm going to tell you today, right now. First, let's start with podcasts. So I have two really great podcasts that I use. I do listen to a variety of other ones, but the first one was Making It with Ricki Lindhome. That was my very first podcast that I listened to that was pretty great. It gave me a lot of advice about screenwriting, and it's actually surprisingly the reason why I decided to join the UCLA Extension Program to begin with. And to be honest, that was the very first review that I put up on YouTube, so pretty much just founded this channel. Ricki Lindhome is an actress. She interviews actors and writers and asks them a little bit more about how they got started in the business, which is amazing because they're successful when they come on the show to talk to her, and it's really down to earth and realistic. For me, this podcast also dispelled a lot of the whole so-called natural talent that people might seem to be built in with. The next podcast that I want to recommend to you is The Right Process, and this is actually created by the UCLA program, the Extension Program, let me clarify, featuring some of the instructors that are writing not only novels and screenplays, but might be creating other sort of creative arts as well. It's all about writing. It gives you another great breakdown of all of the realistic accomplishments and sort of setbacks that you might have with writing. And it comes from experience from all of these instructors and writers, which is great. What I love about it is it's sort of like the Disney Life podcast now that just came out, where it's currently in the industry professionals who are just giving you some more feedback. They are available to take some classes with, and I really loved the podcast. It gave me a little great outlook of some of the things that I could expect as a professional writer. Now, this is for my multi-hyphenates. Yes, my filmmakers slash editors slash writers slash novelists slash all the slashes, okay? All of the slashes. So if you're one of those multi-hyphenates, you do want to do the filmmaking portion of your writing, then this resource is for you. That's D for Darius. I used to watch him all the time. He gives you a rundown of how to do some guerrilla shooting, which just means basically taking any old camera and going out without any permission or really very much experience and just shooting. He does also give you a little bit of information about writing, although most of his information is geared toward the actual production side. Film Courage also gives you a lot of really great information from screenwriters, instructors, and overall professionals in the field, producers even, that give you a little insight into the business, and that's a great resource. They're in small snippets. I love them. A lot of people recommend them when they're in the field, and I've honestly recently found out that their videos are actually pushing my videos. Film Riot is another really great resource. They do the pre-production, post-production, all of that production side of things too. And they also give you some tips about writing any sort of short films, things like that. They're a great overall well-rounded resource, just like D4Darius, that teaches you a little bite size of everything and really easy to follow along with. Not very long either, so digestible content too. So let's talk about ideas, because that's your bread and butter for even beginning this whole writing process. Now, I firmly believe that anybody can write. So if you don't quite have the ideas flowing just yet, there's tons of writing prompts that you can find online for free. You can also buy books that actually give you writing prompts. I do own a few myself, and you can find them pretty much anywhere, at a Target, at a Walgreens. I don't know why I said Walgreens. I think I meant Walmart. Barnes & Noble, whatever your place of choice is. Write down any idea that you have, even if it's just a grain of an idea, sort of a seed that you can just plant and let it grow. Pretty much anything. I mean, you can probably write something about a pencil if you get creative enough. Try to listen to stories from family and friends around you and dramatize it. If you're still struggling even after listening to someone talk about their day, think about those fairy tales and classic books that might have hit the domain that you can use for free, and try to put your twist on that. We know that Hollywood likes to do that all the time, so why not you try it? Now, don't focus too much on what the right concept is, or what's the most money-making concept, or focusing on something that you can film right away. We just want to focus on staying motivated and writing something that we enjoy and we like. So pick something that you really feel you can just grab onto and run with it. Now let's talk about the writing formats. You have a few to choose from, but for the most part, I'm just going to describe these, and then I'd really like you to work on a short film first. Feature films are 90 to 120 page films, and this is what you commonly see on TV as a full TV film, or you see in a movie theater, or of course on Netflix now, because streaming services are so popular that you see them pretty much everywhere now. Short films, which are ranging from 1 page to 45 pages. Although, of course, we want to stay on the smaller end with short films because that's how audiences want to see them right now. We're starting to see short films now in 60 seconds, like on TikTok and Reels. That's how short it's getting. You have TV formats, which for comedy would be about 22 pages to 35 pages, and hour-long dramas that are 60 pages and can be as high as 75 pages. When you first start writing, my biggest tip is to start with short films, and that's because you want to keep your motivation for finishing projects up by actually completing them. Now, we want to really focus on short films being pretty much centered around a moment in time for the character, not the same way that you would take a full feature film. You're not squishing it down into 1 page or 5 pages or 10 pages. You're really just trying to find a moment in time that's very important for this person or this character that you're writing, and show a little bit about what's going on, how they react to it, and how they actually either get through part of it or show us a very small change that happens for them by just going through this moment in time. Does it shift their perspective? That's what you do when you write a short film. So while writing a short film can seem very challenging, just know that it's actually a really great practice for then expanding into feature films. I highly suggest that you write quite a few short films before you get to writing a full feature-length film, because there's really and truly no rush to getting to a feature film. And also from experience, I have run before I walked in this medium, and it is truly a lot more chaos and complexity and can absolutely ruin your taste for the medium itself. So I have found myself almost quitting visual writing. Now, for those of you who are saying, I want to write TV, we're still going to start with short films. And that's because short films are still a nice, great short version to really start getting your feet wet in just writing in general, getting used to writing action description, character names, understanding format, and making those small mistakes in a smaller project that revising is going to be a lot quicker and easier for you. This is why we're going to start with short films. Something many writers will recommend to you will be watching and reading. You'll often hear you need to watch lots of movies and read lots of scripts, and they're absolutely right. Watch as many short films as you can in the areas and genres that you're really interested in writing, and watch lots of movies so that you can observe scenes and observe the story, just not from an audience perspective. I think something that writers forget to tell you is that watching like an audience member versus watching like a screenwriter or a storyteller is a very different experience. I have 2 videos on my channel that you can actually watch about how to watch a movie like a screenwriter, and of course how to watch TV like a screenwriter. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you want to go back into my channel and watch those. I will also link them above and hopefully down below. When you're watching, I want you to ask a few questions to yourself, and you can pause the video and write this down as I go through them. But basically, here's the questions. What does the character want in the beginning of the movie? Or what do you get a sense that they want at the beginning? Now, this could be emotionally if you're watching a dramatic film, and this can also be something that they physically and tangibly want. If you can find both, even better. But concentrate on the one that actually speaks to you the most. The next thing I want you to really think about is what prompts them to go on this journey? What is the thing that propels them into the action that's happening in the full story? Is there something that actually maybe someone says to them, or something that someone offers them, or an opportunity that comes up? What is the thing that actually causes them to get to that moment that really kicks off the actual story? And what that means is that that's pretty much going to be your plot point. Now, how do they feel about what happens along the way? Take notice of what the character is saying or doing that kind of gives off what they feel emotionally. What is that thing that is really taking control of how they feel? If you're not noticing too much of these elements yet, don't worry, this is something that happens after you take some more practice in, you watch some more movies, you study the structure of storytelling a little bit more, and really I'm just giving you ideas of things to kind of look out for and start to take notice of now, so that it becomes something that you internalize later on, and it becomes almost like second nature when you write it into your scripts and your stories. When you get to the end, I want to know what that character had to give up at the end. Did they ultimately become a better person, or did they become a worse person? And did they give up that feeling or that thing that they wanted at the beginning, at the very end? All right, scribes, we're getting much closer to actually beginning the writing. And if you're liking this video right now, remember to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Now for the reading part. The reading part is really important because it shows you other technical things that you can incorporate into your script, montage sequences, some really crafty ways to add in special effects if you're writing a sort of genre piece, and these things are really important, especially if you're reading the right content that you actually want to focus on in the future. Now, there's not a lot of short films that come with their script, so you're going to have to read feature films or television shows for now. Download these on the Script Lab, and you can also find them on Screencraft. If you're having trouble finding these, just leave me a comment down below, and I'll do my best to get you linked up with some of those cool downloadable screenplays. Okay, formatting. I'm going to give you a very quick guide through the very basics of screenwriting so that you understand just the basic elements of formatting. Once you get a screenwriting software, which there are many of free ones, and I will mention them in this video, so stay put. Screenwriting softwares put in all of the effort to actually format it for you, so it's a lot easier to just go ahead and start typing away, pressing that enter key, and it goes ahead and automatically formats the spacing for you, formats the capitalizations for you, and of course puts in the parentheticals for you. Of course, we're going to learn all about that right now. Now, for feature films and short films, you don't have to head Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 if you're familiar with the 3-act structure. You will be using that structure as your basis for storytelling, so get familiar with it if you are not quite familiar with it yet, and of course, find what works for you. For a second, let's talk about the 3-act structure. Now, this is comprised of your major beats. This is the major beats of storytelling that actually get you from point A to point B, and they occur in 3 different segments. Act 1 is comprised of the hook, the inciting incident, and the first plot point. The hook draws us into the world that the character lives in. The inciting incident is the moment that something happens to the character's life to sort of shift it just slightly so before they actually kick off with the plot point, the actual acceptance of the journey. Your character accepts the journey, and that thrusts you into Act 2. Act 2 is really comprised of all of the obstacles that lead up to the midpoint, which can be a twist or a big surprise or something that occurs to the character that dramatically sort of shifts their perspective even further. We come to the next few obstacles that sort of start to decline for that character and cause so much more issues and problems, and of course leads to their crisis or disaster, which then thrusts them into plot point 2. Act 3 starts to wrap up everything. All of the friends that they've lost, they've now got to get back on their own, and they need to do this within a time frame so that they can stop something from occurring or fix a problem or situation that they got themselves into, and generously wraps up everything at the end, or makes it 100 times worse for that character, in which they actually have a tragic ending and creating an anti-hero. Basically, the 3rd act is all just resolution. Now let's get into the parts of screenplay. And in this part, I'm actually going to use my own sample. This is an excerpt from Parallel. This is just the beginning, basically the first page. And this is a sci-fi drama that I wrote personally. And let me show you how I break down the elements of what I created right in the first page. Let's start with the scene heading. The scene heading tells us if we're in the exterior location or an interior location. Think of these as blueprints for the actual team who's creating the production to actually put this visually to the audience. We have to know if it's inside or outside, and that's broken up into INT dot, which means interior, or can be exterior, so that's EXT dot. And that's how you begin every scene heading, or slug line as they sometimes call it. The next portion of that scene heading is going to be the location. Now you can interchange this next part with whatever location you're in. If you're in a house, you might want to say bedroom. So you'd say interior, INT, dot, you never spell it fully out, bedroom. That tells us we're inside a bedroom. The next portion to this scene heading will be dash, day, night, afternoon, whatever your preference would be for the time of day that this is occurring, if that's very important to you. In screenwriting software, once you actually fill that in and you hit enter, it'll go immediately to the action description. And that's where you describe the action that's happening in the scene as well as the surrounding. Now, if you're used to novel writing, you're going to want to cut a lot of that description out of there. We don't really need to know the curtains or what sort of bedding is there, just what's happening in the scene. That's very important visually. You can see that the first time I introduce my character, she's all in caps, and then I've got a parentheses with her age. The first time you see a character's name, you're going to want to capitalize it, all caps, and then for the rest of the script, you will not have to capitalize it again unless you're introducing a new character. As you can see for the next character, I capitalized the full name when introducing them with, again, the age. You don't have to put that age again after that first introduction, and then I gave a small snippet of what they might look like because it's very essential to the story that I'm telling to actually visually tell you what he looks like. Below the action description, you'll see 3 new lines, and centered on the page, written all in caps, is the beginning of the dialogue. That represents the character who's speaking, so that's all in caps. And this will format it for you always in the screenwriting software, so don't worry about that either. I've got parentheticals afterwards, which just describes a little bit more about the way that she's speaking the piece of dialogue. So, screaming, and that's not going to be capitalized. You will never capitalize anything in parentheses, just so you know. Parenthetical is not always necessary unless you're trying to really get across the action that's happening as they're speaking the piece of dialogue. So if they've got a tremor in their voice, if they are sort of gasping for air, you can also sort of put that in the parenthetical so that you're explaining a little bit more about what's happening with the character. But most of the time, the actors can actually get a feel for what's happening in the scene and won't need you to make a parenthetical with that information. To keep things simple, you don't need to put any camera directions, you don't need to put cut to, you don't need to put fade in or fade out actually. So keep it very simple and only use these few items that I've shown you today for that formatting. If you want to get creative, read the scripts and you can actually get an idea for how to create more visually complex scenes. Drumroll please. Okay, we're at the writing part. Since I can't physically be there for the writing part, I'm going to give you a lot of tips and advice about how I actually structure my writing process. These are things that make it easier for me and sort of eliminate a lot of the writer's block that could happen when you go sit down to write. First things first is software. I mentioned that I would get to the software bit, so let's talk about the free software that I can recommend to you. For those of you who have seen my other videos, you know that I've partnered in the past with RStudio. RStudio has a free basic use version of their screenwriting software, which is awesome. Their screenwriting software has been used by the writers of Arcane on Netflix. If you're a fan of League of Legends, down below I do have a link for you to get $30 off your subscription with RStudio so that you can get access to the best of the features, which actually helps you develop your story in a very visual way. Another great screenwriting software is Celtx. Celtx is the one that I started with a long time ago. You can also click my link down below for Scrivener. Scrivener is the one that I do use pretty often, mostly because I write both novels and screenwriting. I do also own a bunch of other screenwriting programs because they work best for different uses. Do consider checking that out if you're sort of the multi-hyphenate who likes to dabble in both quite often. All of them do a great job of formatting for you so that you take the guesswork out of it and you don't really have to harp on, are you formatting it, so you can concentrate on story. Depending on your style, you might like the outlining portion of things and you may hate it. This is kind of a toss-up between most writers. I happen to love to plan out all of my beats, to plan out most of my scenes, to really get a feel for who my characters are. A lot of that development is great to get used to if you want to do this professionally. Becoming a professional writer might mean that you have writing assignments and lots of deadlines. And not only that, but if you do get hired to rewrite your own stuff for a production studio or for even a manuscript with a talent agency or a book publisher, you will have to write on deadline and you will have to do it pretty effectively, and doing a lot of the prep work really helps just get through that process very simply. Now for me, I have an organizational need to do this, so organizing all my thoughts stops me from having stray thoughts that completely take over the plot and derail the story. It just helps me get across everything that I meant to when I first started to plan out the writing, and I take it very seriously. I have some other videos about outlining. If you want more videos about outlining or you have questions, remember to drop them down below. The most important for screenwriters is learning to do a beat sheet. So using the 3-act structure, writing out very distinctly and detailed what those major beats are going to be for your story. Basically, a beat sheet would be bullet pointing all of the things that's going to happen in your story. I get as detailed as I can, even about the additional scenes that are going to come in between the major points, and I understand how to build up to that major sequence that's going to happen for my character. Remember that writing doesn't have to be perfect. We're not perfect writers in the beginning. As someone who's just learning the craft, learn to enjoy the process and the adventure of finding your own writing voice. That's the part that you won't be able to get back. The journey towards your very specific and very unique purpose for writing. Every true screenwriter knows that rewriting is the key to great writing. Concentrate on getting used to writing that zero draft or that vomit draft, quote unquote, where you just get everything out onto paper and then you can learn to refine it and make better passes to really elevate the work. You will never do your best work on your first pass. In a short film script, your major beats are going to be very, very quick. There's not going to be a whole lot of those middle connecting scenes that I was talking about for feature films. There's going to be a lot more quick, one after another beats happening just to get through your story. Since we're focusing on a moment, it should be really easy to sort of plot out what's going to happen. Make sure that there's some internal work happening with your characters, so if they're feeling sad at the beginning of a movie, we need to uplift them by the end. So let's talk about habits. Habits, these are a big one. This is building that writing muscle, because guaranteed it's going to be really hard, sometimes painful, to get out a story, because sometimes our writing habits are just not fueling us and motivating us enough. I want you to build milestones for yourself. So if writing for 30 minutes was not something that you can do before, or just wasn't something that you've ever thought of doing, just write for 30 minutes and then start to increase that. If you write once a week, start to increase to twice a week. If you have a hard time writing or getting started or keeping the flow going, or any of those things, sometimes what you need to do is try the Pomodoro technique, which is setting a timer for about 20 minutes, writing for 20 minutes, breaking for 5, and then going back to another maybe 20 minutes, or you can lower it to 15 minutes. The great thing is you can raise or lower the time that you're working on your writing and do whatever feels comfortable for you. There are many people who like accountability partners. There's not a hard or fast rule about how to get feedback or how to have your work reviewed. For me, a lot of it was not posting it online and not really relying on family and friends who were not really versed in screenwriting, because a lot of times they don't know themselves what a great story is. Usually I would look for someone who's more experienced than me to give me a little bit of feedback when they could. Mostly I focused on writing as a whole, looking up resources, and trying to learn or get into courses that could teach me the proper way of writing a script. Now, I talk about my top screenwriting course in a few different videos, so definitely check out my channel. Remember to subscribe and like this video if you like this kind of content. That comes to the end of this video, Scribes. I hope you enjoyed my take on the guidance that I would give to any one of you if you asked me where to start when writing. I will see you on the next one, Scribes.